Hello everyone, and welcome to Age of Noob. Strategy games can be daunting for new players to the genre, and Age of Empires 4 is no different. However, with some basic tips and tricks, you can make your life a whole lot easier and slingshot your skill level significantly forward. Hence, here's a list of 50 tips that you can apply to your games that should help smooth your experience in Age of Empires 4, so without further ado, let's dive right in. First of all, many thanks to the contributors on the Reddit post. There were tons of useful comments and they ensured that I did not miss out any of the important tips in the list that I curated. Second, I will compartmentalize the tips in a specific way. For almost each tip, I will be giving a difficulty rating out of 5, a practice needed rating out of 5 as well, and a priority of high, medium, or low. Now, a difficulty of 5 does not necessarily mean that they are very difficult to achieve, but simply means that they have a higher skill ceiling than some of the other tips. In fact, the more you get better at higher difficulty tips, the much better player you'll be overall. Practice needed, on the other hand, captures how much in-game experience you need to get good at a certain tip provided. So while some of the tips could be easy to understand and implement, you just need to practice the muscle memory to build it into your game. And finally, priority showcases how important it is for you to focus on that thing for the time being. Low priority tips do not mean they're useless, but that you get more value focusing on the higher priority tips first before you focus on the lower priority ones. After all, I believe all 50 tips should be useful for you. And finally, some of the tips mentioned will be generalized for the sake of brevity. For example, I will tell you to learn about unit counters, but that topic itself warrants a whole video of its own. Hence, for those tips, I'll either link you another video of mine that I've already covered in the past, or I will be making a video about it in the very near future. So be sure to be subscribed to not miss out on any upcoming educational content. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's get into the 50 tips you need to know for Age of Empires 4. Number 1, and I have to start with this tip and emphasize it. Speed does not matter. APM or actions per minute does not matter. There are tons of low elo players who mention that they simply cannot climb above their rank or elo in-game because they're just slow players or cannot execute fast enough. And that is 99% of the time simply untrue. This myth has been debunked time and time over by myself and especially the pro players. There are a ton of examples in AoE 4, AoE 2, StarCraft, or many other games where the pro player plays with the mouse only, gives a few minutes of head start to the other player, or has limits of actions per minute. Every time they still win, because strategy games at their core are about decision making first and execution second. Speed and APM truly begin to matter at only the highest level of the game, where 99% of us will never play in our lifetimes. So stop worrying about trying to play faster and begin focusing on playing smarter and on decision making in general. Number 2, start using hotkeys. This may sound funny after my emphasis on how speed does not matter, but hotkeys are not only for speed. There are a ton of useful hotkeys such as selecting all idle villagers, selecting all idle military, jumping to town centers and production buildings, and so on that clean up your gameplay, especially if you have a hard time tracking everything going on in the game. I will be making a standalone video regarding hotkeys to dive deeper into it, but for now, practice hotkeys for buildings, idle villagers and military, and selecting eco and military buildings. I'd say hotkeys are in the middle of the park as it relates to difficulty and practice required. Number 3, play the intro tutorial. While I think they could have done a better job with the intro tutorial overall, I still think it's a decent place to start if you're absolutely brand new to Age of Empires 4, as they go over the fundamentals at a slower pace for you. Number 4, do not hoard resources. This is one of the easier said than done tips, which is why it scores highest in difficulty and practice. If you watch pro players, you'll often find all of their resources being lower than a few hundred in the early game, and lower than 1,000 in the mid to late game. That's because resources not spent means units, buildings, and research your opponent will be ahead of you in. This comes with experience and lots of practice. But eventually, you'll get the hang of setting up your economy to constantly produce villagers and the military from your production buildings, while still being able to age up and pick up certain technologies. So my tip for newer players is just to spend your resources on whatever you feel is the correct choice, even if it isn't. With practice and experience, you'll soon figure out what are the correct things to invest your resources in, but for the time being, investing your resources into something is still better than nothing. Number 5, do not idle your town center. Another one of those easier said than done tips, but your town centers should never stop producing villagers until you reach the villager count you need. There are niche examples where this is not the case, but this comes at higher levels of play. For now, ensure your TCs are never idle. Number 6, related to the previous tip, you should be making tons of villagers. The general rule of thumb is to have at least half your population size in villagers. And since we play on the standard 200 population most of the time, it means that you should be training at least 100 villagers every single game. Once again, there are exceptions to this in niche cases, but newer players should still adhere to this rule. Until you reach at least 100 villagers, don't stop making them. Number 7, avoid idle military and villagers. As mentioned in the hotkey tip, make sure you have a keybind for this and practice to check regularly whether you have any idols. Idle military should either be patrolling to defend a section, such as a spearman defending a gold vein, or should be helping you attack. Idle units basically mean wasted resources until they get to work. Number 8. Be careful with boars. They are very strong, and my recommendation is that you need roughly 7 or more villagers to comfortably bring them down without any losses. Losing a villager is never worth it to kill a boar. Number 9. Prioritize food sources. This isn't too high on the priority list, but knowing which food source gives you food the fastest can sometimes prove useful. Shoreline fish with villagers is the fastest, followed by boars, then deer, then sheep and farms, and finally berries. Number 10. Learn build orders. The easiest way to slingshot yourself a few hundred elo is to learn some standard build orders for your civilizations. Build orders are almost the same as openings in chess. There's an ideal way to start the game based on the current patch, and executing that gives you the best early game possible. You'd be surprised how quickly you age up to the fuel age if you execute them well. Unsurprisingly, they require a bit of practice to get decent at and a lot of practice to perfect them to the second. Number 11. Learn to garrison units, especially villagers, to safety. Now, there are a few ways to do this. The easiest way to do this is to mass select your endangered villagers and hit the Seek Shelter button hotkey. This will ensure that your villagers will move to the closest available structure they can garrison, be it a town center, outpost, or keep. Another, more manual way of doing this is to use the Garrison button to instruct your villagers to garrison inside the specific structure you point to, as this gives you more control over your units. When the danger is over and you're ready to release your villagers, you have 3 options. Once again, the fastest way to get everyone back to their original work is to click on the Return All to Work button. When you click that, all garrison villagers on all structures will return to work. Of course, sometimes certain areas of your base are still threatened, so you might want to release some of the safe villagers and keep the others still garrisoned. This is where the Return to Work button comes in handy, as it instructs only the villagers inside the selected structure to go back to work. Finally, you have the Ungarrison button, which basically just releases the villagers outside of the structure to wherever your rally point is pointing at. If you want your villagers to get back to work, never use this button as you'll have to manually assign them all over again. The Ungarrison button is used specifically for movement or for more aggressive plays towards the enemy. Number 12, and this is more of an FYI as it may not be too obvious, but your starting town center is considered a landmark and has significantly more HP than subsequent town centers you build. It can also garrison more villagers as well, so do consider that when you attack your enemy's landmark TC. Number 13, use your scouts efficiently, especially in the early game. Admittedly, this requires practice and muscle memory to flip back and forth between your base and your scout, as you'll gather sheep in the early game and see what your enemy is up to right after. In theory, your scout should never ever be idle, so practice on getting as much information from your scout as possible. Number 14, and this is not 100% necessary for all civilizations or all maps, but training a second scout goes a long way to discovering more of the map quicker, gather more sheep than your opponent, and spotting aggression more reliably. That said, I will be putting this on low priority as you should be focusing on getting comfortable and the most out of one scout first before you have 2. 2 idle scouts are worse than 1 active one. Number 15, remember to refresh your lumbercamps. Refreshing lumbercamps means building another lumbercamp closer to the woodline after your villagers have chopped through a good amount of forest. If you're interested, check out the standalone video I made about the perfect timing on when you should consider refreshing your lumbercamps. That said, if your woodline ever looks like this where the walk time is just so much, it's a no-brainer to quickly build another one right away. Number 16, straighter and longer sections of walling is cheaper than shorter and multiple section ones. This is a low priority tip, but it still saves you a bit of resources. Hence, wherever possible, build longer stretches of walls with fewer angles. Number 17, know when to get economic upgrades. I have a whole slew of videos published on when you should research eco upgrades, including food, wood, and mining techs. Check them out in the description below. Number 18, set up your economy for the army composition you're going for. This might seem obvious, but a lot of new players end up hoarding lots of resources because they're collecting a resource that they won't be spending anytime soon. Focus on how many units you'll be producing each and how many villagers on each resource you need to sustain that production. This is definitely not that easy and will require some practice for sure. Number 19, and this is just as an FYI, but only siege units can attack stone walls, with the exception of Delhi's elephants. Hence, be sure to bring some siege if you want to bring down enemy walls. Number 20, and this is related to the previous point, but incomplete stone walls can still be destroyed by non-siege units. Since walling has been nerfed significantly, do not be afraid to rush down an incomplete section of a wall to break in without the need of siege units. Number 21, stone gates actually have directions, and they do matter which one you choose. I made a whole video about this, so check it out if you're interested. Typically though, you'll want to point your gate outwards and away from your base. Number 22, put some thought into your walling. Most new or lower elo players focus on making a circle around their base, and this is mostly inefficient and gives away too much map control. Sometimes you only have to wall off a certain section of the map. For example, in a mountainous map, you could stonewall the sides and focus your military in the center. This ensures that your flanks are safe from raids and buys you enough time to react if your opponent goes for a surprise attack from the sides. If you already have your military in the center, then you likely don't even need to wall, as your military will already be there for you. In some other examples, pro players sometimes wall the map from side to side as well, following the basic first principle that I mentioned. Number 23. Outposts are excellent for vision, map control, defending resources, and denying resources. They can also be upgraded with different emplacements for each age, as they get progressively more powerful. For newer players, you can build outposts next to your faraway resources to defend them against enemy raids. And against tower rushers, be sure to stay calm and not overreact. I will be making a standalone video on how to defend against tower rushing, so stay tuned for that. Number 24. Be sure to use your keeps both offensively and defensively. Defensively, keeps are great to secure key resources and have lots of farmers around it. This ensures passive defense against raiders, as well as having a large, easy to garrison structure for your villagers to hide in. Offensively, keeps can be used to deny resources or even base drop to deny certain areas. Keep in mind that keep drops in the Imperial Age are mostly redundant, as your opponent will likely have siege ready to immediately bring it down. Their power definitely diminishes in the Imperial Age. Number 25. Avoid long production queues. The more units you have queued, the more locked up resources you have that you could have used to age up, queue other units, or research technologies. While it may be an easy concept to understand, it's a bit of a tough habit to get rid of for new players. And yes, it's admittedly difficult for newer players to keep constant production from town centers and military structures without long queues, as they have to remind themselves to keep going back and queue more units. Hence, this one will definitely take some practice, but having this skill in your arsenal ensures highly efficient use of your resources and hitting your timings more consistently. Number 26. Remember to pick up relics. They are not the win condition in lower elo games, but they go a long way in providing you with that extra passive gold, as they generate a whopping 100 gold per minute each. Hence, as you reach the Castle Age, begin prioritizing picking up at least 2 or 3 of the relics on the map. Number 27. Use the attack move command. This could easily be the most important tip that you might get out of this video, as it is a super easy thing to implement that goes a very long way. For those of you who don't know, here's the difference between attack move and right-clicking your opponent. Most new players will likely select their military units, then right-click to attack the enemy units. This is problematic, as this is a specific command for all your units to attack the one single enemy unit you right-clicked on, which means most of your units will path horribly and take lots of free damage in the process. It gets even worse if that specific enemy unit retreats while the others engage. Attack move, on the other hand, ensures that your units will attack the closest enemy unit they can reach, which means they'll be engaging the closest enemy as soon as they can. Also, be sure to attack move the ground and not a specific building or a unit. So you should think about attack move as a command to engage the enemy in the specific vicinity that you clicked on, as opposed to a specific enemy unit. Number 28, and this goes a bit contrary to the previous tip, but you should focus fire with your range units and continuously kite. Kiting means to hit and run continuously with your range units. Now, this tip is usually true for the early to maybe the mid game, but becomes less efficient to use in the later stages of the game. In the early game, your units typically cannot one-shot enemy units, so you hit and run until you bring them down one by one. This is important because you want to thin down the enemy's attack and begin having Lanchester's laws in your favor. That said, in the mid to late game, if your range units are massed enough and are more than capable of one-shotting enemy units, then you will likely overkill with each volley you shoot. Hence, you will not maximize the damage output of your units. In a scenario where you have, say, crossbows with men-at-arms in front of them and your opponent has knights with archers behind them, you want to attack move both of your unit types to ensure maximum damage. That said, more advanced players can actually control group a critical mass of crossbows that can barely one-shot a knight and focus fire with those multiple control groups. This is way too advanced for newer players though, so just attack move for the time being. This is also a tough game sense to explain in a short video, and knowing when to focus fire and when to attack move is a skill you will develop with time, which is why the difficulty is set to 5. Hence, if microing your range units is a bit too much for you, then attack move should serve you well for the time being. Number 29. Don't forget about Blacksmith upgrades. Blacksmith upgrades are vital in Age of Empires 4, and while some of them are more important than others, they are the difference maker in most situations. Again, I'll make a whole video about this for a deep dive, but for now, prioritize getting the upgrades for only the units you have right now or plan on making in the very near future. Number 30. Know your unit counters. Once again, I'll have to make a standalone video for this, but for now, refer to this diagram given to us by the developers. Funnily enough, this diagram is not entirely accurate and isn't all-encompassing, but it's still a decent start for beginners to see which units counter which, at least at lower levels. Start with this now and come back later for my upcoming video for more info. Number 31. Understand Lanchester's Law. In a nutshell, Lanchester's laws explore the relative strength of military forces, especially as it relates to military numbers and damage output. In short, when all else is equal, being outnumbered is not a good thing, and the more outnumbered you are, the heavier your losses, and it's not linear. For example, if you have 9 knights and you fight against 10 knights, the enemy will not be left with just 1 knight. You can't just subtract 9 from 10 and assume that your enemy will be left with just 1 knight, as they'll have more than 1 left even after all of yours are dead. Similarly, if you have 5 knights and they have 10, they won't be left with 5 knights, but closer to 8 knights or so. This is why the earlier point of focus firing matters. The quicker you can dwindle enemy damage output, the more likely you can tip the engagement in your favor. Number 32. Use Springalds against siege units. Springalds are specialized anti-siege siege units, and they have insane range and damage against other siege units. They are a must-have before Imperial Age siege units kick in, as up until that point of the game, they are single-handedly the best way to counter siege units from distance. Number 33, and this is just another FYI, but there is no friendly fire in Age of Empires 4. So don't be afraid to use your mangonels, Springalds, cannons, and so on, as they will only damage enemy units. Number 34. This is also an FYI, but your military units do not take up the same population space. Siege units, ships, and some other units take up more population space, so keep that in mind as you reach 200 population. Number 35. Heal your wounded units. This usually is an afterthought for many players, and admittedly it's not used in every scenario, but there are multiple ways to heal your units during the slower times of the game where you are waiting for critical upgrades and aren't under pressure. Monks and their variants can heal your units, and certain civilizations have unique abilities, landmarks, and so on to heal units as well. Number 36. Obtain map control. One of the tougher concepts to master in any RTS game, knowing when it is advantageous to relinquish map control and when it is advantageous to obtain it requires a ton of experience and skill in decision making. In most games, having map control is almost always a positive thing, unless you're allowing your opponent to freely outboom you. You should only relinquish map control if you know that you'll be able to obtain it once you hit your timing. Otherwise, controlling and denying nearby choke points and resources of your opponent can usually lead to victory. Number 37. Build multiple production buildings. This one seems obvious, but many new players typically make 1 or 2, say, barracks with 15 mana terms queued on each. In the mid to late game, you'll need to produce units much quicker, so it's not uncommon to have 5 to 10 of the production buildings of the main unit you're training. In other words, instead of having 2 barracks with 15 mana terms queued on each, you should have 10 barracks with 3 mana terms queued on each. Of course, this means that you'll be able to make use of your resources and train those 30 mana terms literally 5 times faster. Number 38. Check your minimap regularly. This is a good thing to do that requires some practice and some good habit building. The minimap will give you immediate insights on incoming raids especially, and helps you react much faster to things happening on the map, so check it often even during downtimes. Number 39. Don't be afraid to use your market to balance your economy. We all make mistakes and sometimes plans derail. If you were forced to collect wood with more villagers than you would have liked just to avoid idling them, don't be afraid to sell your excess wood. In theory, the less you use your market, the better, but even pro players utilize the market occasionally to adjust to the realities of their game. When used correctly, it's a great get out of jail free card when things don't go to plan. Number 40. Population efficiency matters in the late game. Army compositions and good army control are what determine the winner in the late game, but a part of that reality stems from how powerful your 200 population space is made up of. Hence, all else equal, if you have 50 archers and the enemy has 50 strelitzes or elephants, then they will win the engagement when both of you are at 200 population. Powerful, more expensive units make use of population space much better as you approach the late game. Number 41. Utilize rally points. When you have production buildings selected, right-clicking anywhere on the map creates a rally point for the units produced to go directly after being trained. This does include pastures from the Mongols, where the newly created sheep will move towards. This is an important efficiency play that is very easy to use. Number 42. Utilize the fast building trick. A great feature in Age of Empires 4 is that building placement is not sensitive to be perfect. In other words, if you cannot place a building at the desired spot, the game will automatically create a blueprint at the nearest available spot for the building. This means that you can build a mill, then spam shift-click the center of the mill 8 times to create the perfect farm placement around the map without having to individually place the farms. The same is true for placing farms around a town center or even when you want to quickly build a lot of houses. It's a convenient feature that you should definitely use. Number 43. As alluded to in the previous point, the shift key is your best friend in a game. From a production standpoint, shift-clicking on unit production queues 5 units instead of 1, which saves you a lot of clicks. For example, if you want to quickly queue 30 men-at-arms through your 10 barracks, you can select all of your barracks then shift-click the men-at-arms 6 times, instead of 30 individual times without shift. Apart from that, shift-clicking also helps with efficiency of commands. You can instruct a villager to build a house, then immediately mine gold, for example. In that scenario, you'd instruct a villager to build the house, then shift-click the gold vein. And yes, you can shift-click as many times as you want. This also works with military units, but the usage of it is less important due to how effective the attack move is. Also, you can shift-click rally points as well, so you can indicate which way your newly produced units should take. And one final tip is for the monks, where you can right-click on the relic to pick it up, and then shift-click the monastery so you don't have to remember instructing him to come back again. There are numerous other examples, but these are the most common ones that you can start with. Number 44. Use Ctrl-Click. The most efficient way of selecting everything of the same type on your screen is to either double left-click or control left-click on it. In larger battles where you may have lost your army control groups, quickly control-clicking a unit will help you gather them again. Number 45. And as alluded to in the previous point, control groups are key to success in Age of Empires 4. Control groups are done by holding the control key and pressing any of the numbers or F keys by default. Hence, if you have your 10 archers selected already, you can hit Ctrl 1 to map them to the number 1 key. This way, whenever you hit 1 again, those units will be selected. As you may have guessed, this is imperative to control your army effectively in groups and the most common way of engaging them into battle. Ensure that each type of unit is grouped as 1, so archers can be 1, men-at-arms can be 2, and Springalds can be 3, and so on. There isn't a set way of doing this, so use keybinds on whatever is comfortable for you. You can also control group certain production buildings. This is a bit more advanced than having a hotkey for selecting all barracks, as you may want to produce from certain barracks and not others. This is why the difficulty and practice needed is high. It's relatively easy to get into for the basics, but the skill ceiling of effectively using control groups can get high. Number 46. Another note of control groups, centering the map, for me at least, is super disoriented and messes up my flow. If you go to your in-game settings under controls, you'll find idle villager, idle military, find and cycle through units, and so on. You should never use follow, but the other two options are select only and select and center camera. This means that every time you hit the control group or hotkey, it will move the camera to center on that unit. Some players like this, but I personally think that it disorients the player too much, especially for newer players. Hence, I keep them at select only and move my camera manually if I want to. That said, this is partially a preference thing, so if you're more comfortable with the camera always centering, then all power to you. Number 47. Consider the panoramic zoom level. Some players are okay with the current zoom level, but if you'd like to see more of the map and zoom out a tad more, go to the settings and change your zoom level to panoramic zoom. Number 48. As good practice, look at your game statistics to see what went wrong or right in your game. Look at the population graph to see who was ahead at what stage of the game, and also resources collected and other timings as well. You should be able to gather some insights on what to improve on at your skill level, especially from your losses. Number 49. Similar to the previous point, if you see that your opponent has done something much better than you, then watch the replay of the game and see how they played to win against you. Once again, you get to learn more from your losses than wins, so focus on watching your losses more. And finally, number 50. Watch professionals play. There is an upcoming Age of Empires 4 tournament called Red Bull Walhalla Legacy, in which the best of the best will get to play for the $300,000 prize pool. Now, watching pro gameplay is not for everyone, as some people are able to pick up a few things from just watching only, while others cannot pick up things on their own to improve on. If you are the former type of person who is observant, give it a go and join our view parties on Twitch at EGCTV and eventually on the Red Bull channels. As honorable mentions on other things you can do, there are a ton of community-made resources, mostly hosted already on a website called awe4world.com. My channel, alongside other channels on YouTube, have educational content to check out as well. Moreover, one technical thing you can also fix if it's a problem for you is to ensure that you're running the game with at least 60 frames per second. Having at least 60 FPS allows you to click and move around easier, so if your PC is struggling, consider tuning down your graphics a bit, especially anti-aliasing, to help you smooth out your gameplay. And as a final note, remember that Age of Empires 4 is just a video game, and we are all here hopefully to have a bit of fun. It's not worth stressing over or having anxiety that you might lose, so go into your games with an open mind, learn from your mistakes, and you'll be enjoying Age of Empires 4 for many hours to come. Well, that's all I have regarding generalized tips for Age of Empires 4. I hope all of you at least picked up a thing or two to focus on to improve on your games. And as mentioned throughout the video, there are still lots of upcoming educational content in the works currently in Age of Noob, so be sure to like and subscribe to not miss out. If anything, you can share these videos to your friends who are new to Age of Empires 4 or ones that you'd like to introduce to the game. And as a final note, I hope everyone had a relaxing holiday break, and I wish you all a happy, healthy, and auspicious year ahead. Thank you so much for supporting me the past few years, and I look forward to sharing more videos with you folks soon. As always, thanks for watching everyone, and don't forget to keep making villagers, and see you all in the next one.